In the dimly lit command center of the Viridian Defense Force, Captain Jack Marlowe sat, his eyes fixed on the flickering holographic display before him. The air was heavy with tension, a palpable sense of urgency hanging in the air like a shroud. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery fire echoed through the night, a grim reminder of the relentless war raging across the surface of Viridian Prime. Jack's fingers drummed impatiently on the armrest of his chair as he waited for the next transmission from High Command. Every fiber of his being was on edge, his senses attuned to the slightest hint of movement or sound. He knew that at any moment, the call to arms could come, summoning him and his men to the front lines once more. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the shrill beep of the communication console. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he leaped to his feet, his eyes locking onto the blinking red light indicating an incoming message. With a quick gesture, he activated the console, the holographic display springing to life before him. The face of General Harding, the grizzled commander of the Viridian Defense Force, materialized in the air before Jack. His expression was grave, his features etched with lines of fatigue and determination. Behind him, the bustling activity of the command center could be seen, the constant hum of activity a testament to the desperate struggle for survival that consumed them all. "Captain Marlowe," General Harding's voice crackled over the speakers, his tone somber but resolute. "We have a mission for you and your team, one that could turn the tide of this war." Jack's pulse quickened at the general's words, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew that every mission was a gamble, a roll of the dice in the deadly game of war. But he also knew that he and his men were the best hope humanity had against the Zarathian invaders. "What's the mission, sir?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil roiling within him. General Harding's eyes bore into Jack's, a silent acknowledgement of the risks involved. "We've received intel on a crucial Zarathian supply depot located deep behind enemy lines. Your task is to infiltrate the depot and sabotage their operations. If successful, it could give us the edge we need to finally push the Zarathians back." Jack's jaw clenched at the gravity of the mission, the weight of responsibility settling heavily upon his shoulders. He knew that failure was not an option, that the fate of Viridian Prime and all who called it home rested in his hands. "Consider it done, sir," Jack replied, his voice firm with determination. "We'll leave at once." With a curt nod from General Harding, the transmission ended, leaving Jack alone once more in the dimly lit command center. Outside, the rumble of artillery fire continued unabated, a constant reminder of the war that raged on. But in that moment, Jack felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a beacon of light in the darkness of war. For he knew that no matter the odds, he and his men would do whatever it took to emerge victorious. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting a pale silver glow over the war-torn landscape of Viridian Prime. In the heart of the Viridian Defense Force base, Captain Jack Marlowe stood in the dimly lit briefing room, his gaze fixed on the holographic map projected before him. Around him, his team gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft blue light of the hologram. Sergeant Ramirez, with his weathered features and steely eyes, stood tall beside Corporal Chen, a young soldier with a determined expression. Specialist Reynolds, the tech expert, hunched over his datapad, his fingers flying across the screen as he analyzed the mission parameters. Jack cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Listen up, everyone," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "We've been tasked with a mission of vital importance. Our objective, to infiltrate a Zarathian supply depot deep behind enemy lines and sabotage their operations." He gestured to the holographic map, indicating their route. "We'll travel by foot through the abandoned city outskirts, avoiding main roads to evade Zarathian patrols. Once we reach the depot, we'll disable their power generators and plant explosives to cripple their supply chain." Sergeant Ramirez nodded, his expression grim. "It won't be easy, sir. The Zarathians will have defenses in place, and they won't hesitate to use them." Jack's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with determination. "I know it's risky, but this mission could turn the tide of the war in our favor. We can't afford to fail." Corporal Chen straightened, her voice firm. "We'll get it done, Captain. You can count on us." Jack nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Good. Gear up and meet me at the rendezvous point in 20 minutes. We move out at 0300 hours. With that, the team dispersed, each member silently steeling themselves for the perilous mission ahead. Jack watched them go, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. The fate of Viridian Prime hung in the balance, and he knew that failure was not an option. As he prepared his own gear, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension gnawing at his gut. But beneath the fear lay a steely resolve, a determination to do whatever it took to protect his planet and his people. With a final glance at the holographic map, Jack squared his shoulders and set off into the night, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the darkness. For on the battlefield of Viridian Prime, only the brave would prevail, and Jack Marlowe was determined to be counted among them. The moon hung low in the ink-black sky, casting ghostly shadows upon the desolate landscape of Viridian Prime. Captain Jack Marlowe and his team moved with practiced stealth, their footfalls muffled by the soft crunch of gravel beneath their boots. Each breath they took seemed to echo in the silence, a reminder of the gravity of their mission. The air was heavy with tension as they navigated through the war-torn terrain, every nerve on edge, every sense heightened to the danger that lurked in the darkness. Jack led the way, his jaw set in determination, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Behind him, Sergeant Ramirez, Corporal Chen, and Specialist Reynolds followed in silence, their faces obscured by the shadows of their helmets. The distant rumble of artillery fire served as a constant reminder of the chaos that engulfed Viridian Prime, the relentless clash of steel and plasma that had become the backdrop to their lives. But tonight, they were on a different kind of mission, a mission that could mean the difference between victory and defeat in humanity's war against the Zorathians. As they pressed on, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unease gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on his shoulders, the lives of his team resting in his hands. But he pushed aside his doubts, focusing instead on the task at hand. The journey seemed to stretch on for an eternity, each step a test of endurance, each passing moment an eternity of anticipation. Yet still they pressed forward, driven by a shared sense of purpose and a determination to see their mission through to the end. And then, finally, they reached their destination, a crumbling ridge overlooking the Zorathian supply depot, a sprawling complex of metal and concrete nestled amidst the ruins of a once thriving city. Jack's heart quickened at the sight, the enormity of their task laid out before them like a challenge waiting to be conquered. But there was no time for hesitation. With a silent nod to his team, Jack signaled the start of their descent, each member moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Down they went, inch by painstaking inch, until they reached the valley below, the depot looming ever closer with each passing moment. As they drew near, Jack could feel the tension in the air thickening, a palpable sense of danger that seemed to hang over them like a shroud. But still they pressed on, their resolve unshaken, their determination unwavering in the face of adversity. For tonight, they were soldiers on a mission that would test their courage, their strength, and their loyalty to the very limits of their being. And as they disappeared into the shadows of the night, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together as comrades in arms, bound by a bond forged in the crucible of war. The moon hung like a pale sentinel in the night sky, casting an ethereal glow over the war-torn landscape of Viridian Prime. Captain Jack Marlowe and his team huddled behind a crumbling wall, their breaths shallow as they surveyed the obstacle before them, a Zorathian outpost, bristling with defenses like a porcupine ready to strike. Jack's brow furrowed as he studied the outpost through his night vision goggles. Barbed wire snaked around its perimeter like a metallic serpent, while searchlights swept the area with relentless vigilance. Zorathian soldiers, their sleek forms silhouetted against the harsh light, patrolled the grounds with deadly precision. "We'll never make it through that," Corporal Chen muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper. Jack clenched his jaw, his mind racing with possibilities. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but retreat was not an option. Failure meant more than just defeat. It meant condemning countless lives to the mercy of the Zarathians. "We'll find a way," Jack said, his voice low but resolute. "We always do." With a silent nod, Jack signaled to his team to move out. They crept forward like shadows in the night, their movements slow and deliberate to avoid detection. Every footstep was a heartbeat, every rustle of fabric a thunderclap in the stillness of the night. As they approached the outpost, Jack's heart pounded in his chest like a war drum. One wrong move, one misplaced footfall, and they would be caught in the Zarathians' merciless grasp. But Jack pushed aside his fear, his focus unwavering as he led his team onward. Suddenly, a shout pierced the silence, followed by the blare of alarms. Jack cursed under his breath as Zarathian soldiers swarmed out of the outpost like angry hornets, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. "Take cover!" Jack barked, diving behind a crumbling wall as bullets whizzed past his head like angry wasps. His heart raced as he returned fire, his shots ringing out like thunder in the night. The battle raged on, a symphony of chaos and destruction as Jack and his team fought tooth and nail against the Zarathian onslaught. Explosions rocked the ground, sending showers of dirt and debris into the air like volcanic eruptions. But amidst the chaos, Jack remained focused, his mind clear as a mountain stream. With a well-timed grenade, he blasted through the outpost's defenses, creating a gap for his team to exploit. "Go, go, go!" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the din of battle like a clarion call. With a final surge of adrenaline, they dashed through the breach, leaving the Zarathians in their dust. As they disappeared into the night, Jack allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The battle was won, but the war raged on, and as long as humanity had warriors like Jack Marlowe, there would always be hope in the darkest of times. As the moon cast its pale glow over the war-torn landscape of Viridian Prime, Captain Jack Marlowe led his team through the desolate terrain, their footsteps muffled by the echoes of distant explosions. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, each member of the unit carrying the burden of uncertainty and fear. The journey had been arduous, fraught with peril at every turn. Jack's keen eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of danger amidst the shadows that danced in the moonlight. His heart raced with adrenaline, his senses on high alert as they pressed forward into the unknown. Sergeant Ramirez, his loyal second-in-command, walked beside him, his gaze steely and determined, despite the weariness etched into his rugged features. Behind them, Corporal Chen and Specialist Reynolds followed in silence, their weapons at the ready, their nerves stretched taut with anticipation. The night was alive with the sounds of warfare, the distant rumble of artillery fire, the sharp crack of gunfire, the haunting wail of sirens that pierced the darkness like a knife. Each noise served as a grim reminder of the stakes they faced, the ever-present threat of death lurking around every corner. As they trudged onward, Jack couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of doubt that gnawed at the edges of his mind. Was he leading his team to victory, or to their doom? Were they truly prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, or were they simply pawns in a larger game of war? He stole a glance at Ramirez, whose steely gaze met his own with unwavering resolve. In that moment, Jack found solace in the unspoken bond that bound them together, the shared sense of duty and camaraderie that transcended the chaos of battle. But beneath the facade of courage, Jack sensed the fear that gripped his teammates, the silent whispers of doubt that haunted their thoughts. He knew that they were all grappling with their own demons, struggling to find the strength to carry on in the face of overwhelming adversity. As they pressed forward, Jack resolved to banish the shadows of doubt that threatened to consume them. He knew that their mission was more than just a directive from their superiors. It was a testament to their resilience, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to the cause. With each step they took, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over him, a fierce determination to see their mission through to the end, no matter the cost. For on the battlefield of Viridian Prime, where death lurked around every corner, it was the strength of their spirit that would ultimately determine their fate. And Jack was determined to lead his team to victory, whatever the cost may be. The night air on Viridian Prime was heavy with the weight of war, a suffocating blanket draped over the battered landscape. As Captain Jack Marlowe led his team through the moonlit ruins of a once bustling city, memories of battles past danced like phantoms in his mind. Each step forward was a journey into the heart of darkness, where the echoes of gunfire and the screams of the fallen lingered like ghosts in the shadows. Jack's boots crunched softly against the rubble-strewn streets, a rhythmic cadence that echoed the steady beat of his heart. Sergeant Ramirez walked at Jack's side, his weary eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Behind them, Corporal Chen and Specialist Reynolds moved with silent efficiency, their weapons at the ready. As they pressed on, Jack's thoughts drifted back to the early days of the war. The chaos and confusion of their first encounter with the Zorathians, the desperate battles fought in the streets of Viridian Prime, and the friends lost along the way. He remembered the faces of those who had fallen, their laughter, their courage, their sacrifice. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of the cost of war, etched into his soul like scars upon his heart. But amidst the pain and loss, there were moments of fleeting beauty, a shared joke among comrades, a quiet act of kindness in the midst of chaos, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. As they reached the edge of the city, Jack paused to gaze out across the desolate landscape. In the distance, the faint glow of Zorathian encampments illuminated the night sky, a grim reminder of the enemy's relentless advance. But for now, they were safe, hidden in the shadows, invisible to the watchful eyes of their foes. Jack took a moment to savor the stillness of the night, to draw strength from the quiet courage of his companions, and to steel himself for the trials that lay ahead. For tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to be fought, and new sacrifices to be made. But tonight, in the embrace of darkness, they were warriors, unbroken, undefeated, and unafraid. And as the stars twinkled overhead, casting their silver light upon the ravaged earth below, Captain Jack Marlowe whispered a silent prayer for the souls of the fallen, and vowed to carry their memory with him until the end of days. The moon hung like a silent sentinel in the ink-black sky as Captain Jack Marlowe and his team crouched in the shadows, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding in anticipation. Before them loomed the imposing silhouette of the Zorathian supply depot, a fortress of metal and concrete bristling with weapons and guarded by a legion of alien warriors. Jack's eyes flickered with determination as he surveyed their target, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. Beside him, Sergeant Ramirez gripped his rifle tightly, his jaw set in a grim line, while Corporal Chen checked her explosives with practiced precision, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We're in position," Jack murmured, his voice barely a whisper, as he relayed the final instructions to his team. "Stay low, stay quiet, and follow my lead. We only have one shot at this." With silent nods of understanding, the team set off towards the depot, moving like phantoms through the shattered ruins of the city. Every step was fraught with peril, every shadow hiding potential danger, but Jack's training and instincts guided them unerringly towards their objective. At last, with the last of the explosives in place, Jack gave the signal to retreat, his voice hoarse with tension as he urged his team to move quickly. With one final glance at the depot, now a ticking time bomb of destruction, they vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but echoes of valor and the promise of victory against impossible odds. Under the cloak of darkness, Captain Jack Marlowe and his team crept through the shadowy outskirts of the Zorathian supply depot. The air hung heavy with tension as they moved with the silent precision of predators stalking their prey. Each step was calculated, every breath measured, as they approached their target with a mixture of apprehension and determination. The depot loomed before them like a fortress of steel and concrete, its massive walls bristling with automated defenses and patrolling Zorathian guards. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the scene, knowing that one wrong move could mean disaster for them all. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far to falter. With a nod from Jack, Specialist Reynolds moved forward, his fingers deftly working at the control panel of the depot's main entrance. Sweat beaded on his brow as he manipulated the intricate circuits, his every movement amplified by the deafening silence that surrounded them. Finally, with a soft click, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit interior bustling with activity. Zarathian soldiers scurried about like ants, their alien voices echoing off the metal walls as they loaded crates of supplies onto waiting transports. Jack signaled to his team, and they slipped inside, their footsteps muffled by the sounds of industry. They moved like ghosts through the depot, their senses sharp and alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the far end of the warehouse, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. He pressed himself against the wall, his pulse racing as he strained to see what had caused the commotion. A group of Zarathian guards had discovered their presence and were charging toward them, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Without hesitation, Jack sprang into action, his instincts taking over as he unleashed a barrage of gunfire on their attackers. Bullets flew through the air, the sound of their impact drowned out by the roar of battle. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as he fought with everything he had, his mind focused solely on the task at hand. Meanwhile, Specialist Reynolds and Corporal Chen raced to the depot's power grid, their fingers flying over the controls as they worked to disable the automated defenses. Sparks flew as they severed the connections, their movements a blur of motion and determination. As the last of the Zarathian guards fell to the ground, Jack and his team breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. They had successfully sabotaged the depot and struck a blow against the enemy. But their victory was short-lived, as the sound of reinforcements echoed through the depot. With a grim determination, Jack knew that their fight was far from over. They would need to stay one step ahead of the Zarathians if they were to emerge victorious in this war. And with that thought burning bright in his mind, Jack led his team into the heart of the depot, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air was thick with tension as Captain Jack Marlowe and his team fought their way through the Zarathian supply depot. Explosions rocked the compound, sending debris flying in all directions. Amidst the chaos, Sergeant Ramirez lay wounded, his face contorted in pain as he clutched his bleeding side. "Jack, we can't leave him behind," shouted Corporal Chen, his voice strained with desperation. Jack's heart clenched at the sight of his comrades' agony, but he knew they had no choice. Every second they lingered put the entire mission and their lives at risk. "We have to keep moving," Jack said firmly, his jaw set with resolve. "Ramirez, can you hold on?" Ramirez nodded weakly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I'll try, sir." With a heavy heart, Jack signaled to the team to continue their retreat. As they moved through the crumbling corridors of the depot, gunfire echoed in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger lurking around every corner. Suddenly, a group of Zarathian soldiers burst into view, their weapons trained on Jack and his team. Without hesitation, Jack and the others opened fire, exchanging blistering volleys with their alien adversaries. Bullets whizzed past, narrowly missing their targets as the air filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder. In the midst of the firefight, Jack stole a glance back at Ramirez, who lay huddled against the wall, his face pale and drawn. The sergeant's eyes met Jack's, filled with silent understanding and acceptance. "I'll cover you," Reynolds shouted over the din, spraying bullets at the advancing Zarathians. With a nod of gratitude, Jack hoisted Ramirez over his shoulder and sprinted towards safety, the weight of his injured comrade pressing heavily against him. Each step felt like an eternity as he dodged enemy fire and navigated through the labyrinthine corridors of the depot. Finally, they burst out into the open air, greeted by the sight of their waiting transport ship hovering in the distance. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled energy, Jack raced towards the waiting vessel, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As they reached the relative safety of the ship's interior, Jack gently laid Ramirez down on a makeshift stretcher, his hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. The sergeant's breathing was shallow and labored, but he was alive, for now. "We did it, Ramirez," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We're getting you out of here." But even as he spoke the words, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of guilt gnawing at his conscience. He knew that leaving Ramirez behind was a necessary sacrifice, But that knowledge offered little comfort in the face of his comrade's suffering. As the ship lifted off into the darkening sky, Jack cast one last glance back at the burning wreckage of the depot below. In that moment, he made a silent vow to honor Ramirez's sacrifice by continuing the fight against the Zarathian menace, no matter the cost. The air crackled with tension as Captain Jack Marlowe and his team darted through the chaos of the exploding Zarathian supply depot. Flames licked at their heels, casting eerie shadows against the shattered walls as debris rained down around them. Every step was a gamble, every breath a risk, but they pressed on with grim determination. Beneath the din of battle, Jack's heart thundered in his chest, a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. He stole a glance over his shoulder, counting heads as his team scrambled through the smoke and confusion. Ramirez was limping, blood staining the fabric of his uniform, but he refused to falter. Chen and Reynolds provided cover fire, their weapons blazing as they fought off waves of Zarathian reinforcements. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the depot as a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending a cascade of rubble crashing to the ground. Jack's instincts kicked into overdrive as he lunged forward, grabbing Ramirez and pulling him to safety just as the debris crashed down behind them. They emerged from the dust and smoke, battered but alive, the narrowness of their escape sinking in like a weight on Jack's shoulders. "Keep moving!" he shouted, rallying his team as they pushed forward through the chaos. The explosions seemed to intensify with each passing moment, the very ground trembling beneath their feet as if in protest. But Jack refused to be deterred, his eyes fixed on the exit looming ahead like a beacon of hope in the darkness. As they burst through the crumbling walls of the depot, the cool night air washed over them like a soothing balm, a stark contrast to the inferno they had left behind. Jack took a moment to catch his breath, his chest heaving with exertion as he surveyed the scene before him. The depot lay in ruins, flames consuming everything in their path. But amidst the destruction, there was a sense of victory, a fleeting moment of triumph in the face of overwhelming odds. But there was no time to savor their success. Jack knew that the battle was far from over, that the Zarathians would not take their defeat lightly. With a silent nod to his team, he signaled for them to move out, their mission still unfinished, their resolve unbroken. And as they disappeared into the darkness, their footsteps echoing against the backdrop of war, Jack couldn't help but wonder what other trials awaited them on the path to victory. But one thing was certain: the echoes of valor would ring out long after the dust had settled, a testament to the courage of those who dared to defy fate and fight for a future worth living. The night hung heavy over the battered landscape of Viridian Prime, its darkness a shroud veiling the scars of war. In the dim glow of their makeshift campfire, Captain Jack Marlowe sat with his back against a jagged rock, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Beside him, his remaining comrades, Chen and Reynolds, huddled together, their faces etched with weariness and sorrow. The silence between them was thick with unspoken grief, each man lost in his own thoughts as they mourned the loss of their fallen brothers. Sergeant Ramirez's absence weighed heavily on Jack's heart, a bitter reminder of the sacrifices demanded by war. As the flames crackled and spat, casting eerie shadows against the rocky terrain, Jack's mind drifted back to the moment when he had made the fateful decision to leave Ramirez behind. The memory was seared into his consciousness, a haunting echo of the choices he had been forced to make in the heat of battle. He remembered the chaos of the explosion, the deafening roar of crumbling metal and shattering stone as the Zarathian supply depot went up in flames. He remembered the desperate scramble to escape the inferno, the acrid stench of smoke and burning flesh clinging to the air, and he remembered the agonizing realization that Ramirez lay trapped beneath the rubble, his life hanging in the balance. In that moment of gut-wrenching despair, Jack had faced a choice no leader should ever have to make: risk the lives of his entire team to save one man, or leave him behind to die alone in the darkness. With every fiber of his being screaming in protest, Jack had made the agonizing decision to prioritize the mission above all else, to abandon Ramirez to his fate in order to ensure the survival of the others. Now, as he stared into the flickering flames, Jack's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his chest tight with grief and guilt. He knew that Ramirez's blood was on his hands, a stain that could never be washed away. And yet, even in the depths of his despair, Jack knew that he could not afford to dwell on the past. The mission was far from over, and the lives of his remaining comrades depended on his strength and resolve. With a heavy heart, Jack rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with a newfound determination. "We honor Ramirez's sacrifice by carrying on," he declared, his voice ringing out with steely resolve. "We will not let his death be in vain. We will fight on, for him and for all those who have fallen before us. We owe them that much." And with those words, Jack turned his gaze to the horizon, where the first faint light of dawn was beginning to break through the darkness. In that fleeting moment of hope, he saw the glimmer of possibility, the promise of a new day, and the chance to make a difference in the midst of despair. And though the road ahead would be long and treacherous, Jack knew that as long as he drew breath, he would continue to fight for freedom, for justice, and for the echoes of valor that resonated within the hearts of all who dared to defy the darkness. The war room was silent, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Captain Jack Marlowe stood at attention before the holographic display, his eyes fixed on the flickering images of Viridian Prime's devastated landscape. His heart weighed heavy with both triumph and sorrow, a bittersweet cocktail swirling within him. Around him, the faces of his fellow soldiers bore the marks of exhaustion and grief. They had fought bravely, sacrificing everything for the mission, yet the cost had been steep, paid in blood and tears. "Report, Captain," came the gruff voice of General Hayes, his steely gaze piercing through the holographic haze. Jack cleared his throat, steeling himself to deliver the news. "The sabotage mission was a success, sir. The Zorethian supply depot has been destroyed, dealing a significant blow to their operations." General Hayes nodded, his expression grim. "Casualties?" Jack's throat tightened as he spoke the words he had hoped never to utter. "We lost 6 good soldiers, sir, including Sergeant Ramirez." A solemn silence descended upon the war room, broken only by the sound of stifled sobs and whispered prayers. Ramirez had been more than just a comrade. He had been a friend, a brother in arms. His loss cut deep, leaving a void in their ranks that could never be filled. General Hayes clasped Jack's shoulder with a firm grip, his eyes reflecting the weight of their shared burden. "You did what needed to be done, Captain. Sacrifices are inevitable in war, but your actions have given us a fighting chance." Jack nodded, his jaw clenched against the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He had made the call to leave Ramirez behind, to prioritize the mission above all else. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his days, a burden he would carry until his last breath. As the war room emptied and the echoes of their victory faded into the night, Jack remained alone with his thoughts. He replayed the events of the mission in his mind, searching for solace amidst the wreckage of their shattered dreams. But amidst the pain and the grief, a flicker of hope burned within him. Despite the losses they had suffered, despite the odds stacked against them, they had prevailed. They had proven that humanity was not so easily defeated, that courage and determination could triumph over even the darkest of days. And as he gazed out into the starlit sky, Jack vowed to honor the memory of those who had fallen. He vowed to continue the fight, to never surrender, until the day when Viridian Prime was free once more. The night hung heavy over the Viridian Prime base, shrouding it in an eerie silence broken only by the occasional distant rumble of explosions. Inside the command center, Captain Jack Marlowe sat with his weary team, their faces etched with exhaustion and sorrow. They gathered around a dimly lit table, the flickering light casting long shadows across the room. Jack cleared his throat, his voice raspy with fatigue. "We did it," he said, his words carrying a weight of both triumph and sorrow. "The Zorethian supply depot is no more." A murmur of relief rippled through the room, but it was tinged with sadness for the comrades they had lost along the way. Sergeant Ramirez's absence was felt acutely, his empty chair a stark reminder of the cost of their victory. But amidst the somber atmosphere, there was also a sense of defiance, a flicker of hope that burned bright in the darkness. For the first time in months, they had struck a decisive blow against the Zarathians, and it was a victory worth celebrating, however brief it may be. Yet even as they savored the taste of success, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at his gut. He knew that their actions would only serve to enrage General Zorak and his forces, escalating the conflict to new heights of brutality. And sure enough, as they discussed their next course of action, word reached them of a retaliatory strike by the Zarathians, a brutal assault aimed at crushing the human resistance once and for all. Jack's jaw tightened as he listened to the grim report. He knew that the coming battle would be their toughest yet, a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy hell-bent on their destruction. But despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them, Jack refused to give in to despair. He looked around at his team, their faces set in grim determination, and felt a surge of pride in their resilience. "We've faced worse odds before," he said, his voice firm with resolve, "and we've always come out on top. This will be no different." And with those words, Captain Jack Marlowe led his team out into the night, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them on the battlefield. For they were soldiers, forged in the crucible of war, and they would fight to the bitter end for the freedom of Viridian Prime. In the aftermath of the daring sabotage mission, Captain Jack Marlowe and his team found themselves in a somber haze. The once vibrant base camp now felt like a graveyard, shrouded in the heavy weight of loss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, Jack gathered his weary comrades around a flickering campfire. The crackling flames danced with an eerie rhythm, casting fleeting glimpses of light on the faces of the soldiers gathered around. Their expressions were a mixture of exhaustion, grief, and determination, etched with lines of weariness from endless days of battle. Each one carried the burden of loss, of friends fallen in the line of duty, of dreams shattered by the harsh reality of war. Jack sat silently among his team, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. His thoughts drifted back to the fallen comrades who had sacrificed everything for the mission. Sergeant Ramirez, with his unwavering loyalty and fierce determination. Corporal Chen, whose quiet courage had inspired them all. Specialist Reynolds, whose quick wit and sharpshooting skills had saved countless lives. Their absence hung heavy in the air, a haunting reminder of the cost of war. But amidst the sorrow, there was also a steely resolve, a determination to honor the sacrifices of the fallen and carry on the fight. Jack knew that they could not afford to dwell on the past, no matter how painful it may be. The war raged on, and they had a duty to fulfill, a duty to protect their planet and preserve humanity's future. As the night deepened and the stars emerged like distant beacons in the vast expanse of the sky, Jack rose to his feet, his voice steady despite the emotions churning within him. "My friends," he began, his words echoing in the stillness of the night, "tonight we mourn the loss of our fallen comrades. Their bravery and sacrifice will never be forgotten, but we cannot allow their deaths to be in vain. We must carry on the fight, for their sake and for the sake of all humanity." His words were met with solemn nods and murmurs of agreement from his team. In that moment, they were not just soldiers bound by duty, but brothers and sisters united by a common cause. Together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, drawing strength from each other and from the memories of those who had gone before them. As the campfire dwindled to embers and the night enveloped them in its embrace, Captain Jack Marlowe and his team stood united against the darkness, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unwavering. For in the heart of adversity, they found the courage to defy the shadows and emerge victorious. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape of Viridian Prime, Captain Jack Marlowe and his team prepared for the impending Zarathian assault. The air crackled with tension as they fortified the outpost, stacking sandbags and setting up makeshift barricades to defend against the onslaught. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the defenses, his mind racing with thoughts of the battle to come. The outpost was a crucial strategic position, providing a vital lifeline for the remaining human forces on Viridian Prime. If they lost it, the war would be all but lost. Sergeant Ramirez paced nervously nearby, his face etched with worry. "We're outnumbered, sir," he muttered, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "They'll be coming at us with everything they've got." Jack nodded grimly, his jaw set in determination. "I know, Ramirez," he replied, "but we can't afford to let them take this outpost. We'll hold our ground, no matter what it takes." As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew palpable. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow a potential threat. Jack's senses were on high alert, his muscles tensed for action. Then, without warning, the first shots rang out, shattering the stillness of the night. Zarathian forces surged forward, their alien war cries echoing across the battlefield as they charged towards the outpost with reckless abandon. Jack's heart raced as he opened fire, his weapon blazing as he mowed down wave after wave of Zarathian attackers. Beside him, his team fought with ferocious intensity, their faces set in grim determination as they repelled the enemy onslaught. But the Zarathians kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Explosions rocked the outpost as mortar rounds rained down from above, sending plumes of dirt and debris into the air. Jack gritted his teeth against the onslaught, his muscles aching with fatigue as he fought to keep the enemy at bay. As the battle raged on, Jack's mind flashed back to the faces of his fallen comrades, their memory spurring him on in the face of overwhelming odds. He knew that this was their last stand, their final chance to make a difference in the war that had ravaged their world. With a fierce cry, Jack rallied his team, urging them to fight on despite the odds. They dug in their heels, refusing to yield an inch of ground to the enemy. For hours they battled on, their determination unyielding in the face of adversity. And then, as dawn broke on the horizon, the Zarathians finally began to falter. Their ranks thinned, their advance slowed to a crawl as fatigue and desperation took their toll. Jack seized the opportunity, leading a daring counterattack that broke the enemy lines and sent them fleeing into the darkness. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded into silence, Jack and his team stood victorious amidst the wreckage of the outpost. They had held the line against impossible odds, their courage and sacrifice ensuring humanity's survival for another day. And though the war was far from over, they knew that as long as they stood united, they would never back down in the face of adversity. The air crackled with tension as Captain Jack Marlowe and his team braced themselves for the impending onslaught. They stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons at the ready, facing an enemy horde that seemed to stretch endlessly across the scarred landscape of Viridian Prime. The first wave of Zarathian warriors charged forward, their grotesque forms illuminated by the harsh glare of the planet's twin moons. Their razor-sharp claws glinted in the dim light as they let out a cacophony of guttural roars, their bloodthirsty eyes fixed on the human outpost. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the battlefield, his mind racing with strategies to repel the enemy assault. Behind him, his comrades braced themselves for the coming onslaught, their faces grim but determined. "Steady, everyone!" Jack called out, his voice ringing clear above the din of battle. "We can hold them back. We've faced worse odds before, and we'll do it again." With a roar of defiance, the Zarathians surged forward, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Jack gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his rifle as he opened fire, picking off the advancing aliens with deadly accuracy. Bolts of energy crackled through the air as the two sides clashed in a violent maelstrom of blood and gunfire. The ground trembled beneath their feet as explosions rocked the battlefield, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Sergeant Ramirez fought at Jack's side, his face a mask of grim determination as he mowed down Zarathians with relentless precision. Corporal Chen and Specialist Reynolds provided covering fire, their weapons blazing as they held the line against the alien onslaught. But for every Zarathian that fell, two more seemed to take its place, their relentless advance threatening to break through the human defenses. Jack's heart sank as he watched his comrades fall, their sacrifices fueling his determination to hold the line at all costs. As the battle raged on, Jack's mind flashed back to the faces of those he had lost, Friends, comrades, brothers in arms who had given their lives for the cause. He could hear their voices in the howling wind, urging him to fight on, to never give up hope. With a fierce cry, Jack rallied his remaining troops, leading them in a desperate charge against the advancing Zarathians. Together, they fought with every ounce of strength and courage they possessed, their weapons flashing in the darkness as they pushed the enemy back, inch by bloody inch. At long last, the tide of battle began to turn, the Zarathians faltering in the face of humanity's unwavering resolve. With one final desperate push, Jack and his team drove the aliens back, sending them fleeing into the night. As the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded away, Jack surveyed the battlefield, his chest heaving with exertion. Though battered and bruised, they had emerged victorious, their courage and sacrifice proving once again that the human spirit was indomitable in the face of adversity. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jack knew that their fight was far from over, but as long as they stood together, they would never be defeated. The air crackled with tension as Captain Jack Marlowe and his team braced themselves for the impending onslaught. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their weapons at the ready, faces grim with determination. The outpost they defended loomed before them, a lone bastion against the relentless tide of the Zarathian invaders. The first tremors of the approaching enemy sent shivers down their spines, like the ominous rumblings of a distant storm. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle, his senses alert, every nerve poised for action. Beside him, Sergeant Ramirez gave a nod of reassurance, his steely gaze reflecting the same unwavering resolve that burned within Jack's own heart. Then, like a flood unleashed from the depths of hell, the Zarathians surged forward, their alien forms illuminated by the harsh glare of Viridian Prime's twin moons. They came in a relentless tide, their monstrous war machines shaking the ground with each thunderous step. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he took aim, his finger hovering over the trigger. The air filled with the staccato rhythm of gunfire as his team opened fire, a defiant chorus against the encroaching darkness. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers amidst the ranks of the enemy, casting eerie shadows against the shattered ruins of the outpost. But still, the Zarathians pressed on, their numbers seemingly endless, their determination unyielding. For every alien that fell, two more took its place, their bloodlust unquenched, their hunger for victory insatiable. The battle raged on, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Jack fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his every movement a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Beside him, his comrades fought with equal valor, their courage unwavering in the face of certain doom. And then, just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a deafening roar echoed across the battlefield, shaking the very foundations of the earth. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he turned to see a line of tanks cresting the horizon, their guns blazing with righteous fury. Reinforcements had arrived. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jack and his team redoubled their efforts, their spirits buoyed by the sight of their fellow soldiers charging into battle. The tide began to turn, the momentum shifting in humanity's favor as the Zarathians faltered beneath the relentless onslaught. Slowly but surely, the enemy began to retreat, their ranks broken, their will to fight shattered by the indomitable spirit of humanity. Jack watched with a mix of relief and disbelief as the Zarathians fled into the night, their once formidable army reduced to nothing more than scattered remnants. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded into silence, Jack allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The outpost still stood, its walls scarred but unbroken, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who had defended it. And amidst the wreckage of war, hope flickered like a fragile flame, a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding humanity toward a future free from the shadow of tyranny. The battlefield was a symphony of chaos, the air thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the deafening roar of gunfire. Jack Marlowe stood at the forefront of the defense, his heart pounding in his chest as he surveyed the scene before him. The Zarathians had launched their assault with ruthless precision, overwhelming their defenses with sheer numbers and ferocity. But Jack refused to yield. With gritted teeth and steely determination, he rallied his remaining troops, urging them to stand firm against the tide of enemy forces. Sweat beaded on his brow as he barked orders, his voice a thunderous roar above the din of battle. Around him, his comrades fought with a fierce resolve, their weapons blazing as they repelled wave after wave of Zarathian attackers. Corporal Chen unleashed a hail of bullets from her heavy machine gun, mowing down enemy soldiers with deadly accuracy. Specialist Reynolds, his face streaked with dirt and blood, lobbed grenades into the midst of the advancing horde, sending bodies flying in all directions. But despite their bravery, the situation grew increasingly dire. The Zarathians pressed forward relentlessly, their ranks seemingly endless as they bore down upon the beleaguered defenders. Jack felt a surge of despair welling up within him as he watched his comrades fall one by one, their sacrifices driving home the brutal reality of war. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a thunderous roar echoed across the battlefield, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Jack's heart leaped with renewed hope as he watched a squadron of human gunships swoop down from the sky, their weapons blazing as they unleashed hell upon the Zarathian ranks. The tide of battle turned in an instant. The Zarathians, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, faltered in their advance, their ranks thrown into disarray by the ferocity of the counterattack. Jack seized the opportunity, rallying his remaining troops as they launched a fierce counteroffensive, driving the enemy back with renewed determination. For hours the battle raged on, each side locked in a deadly struggle for supremacy. But in the end, it was humanity's indomitable spirit that prevailed. The Zarathians, battered and broken, were forced to retreat, their dreams of conquest shattered by the resilience of their human adversaries. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Jack stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his spirit soaring with triumph. The victory had come at a heavy cost, but it was a victory nonetheless, a beacon of hope in the darkness of war. And as Jack looked out at the faces of his comrades, battered but unbowed, he knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their determination to defend their home and their freedom. The dust settled over the battlefield like a heavy blanket, muffling the sounds of war and leaving behind a surreal silence. Captain Jack Marlowe surveyed the scene before him, his heart heavy with the weight of loss and the burden of command. The outpost lay in ruins, its once sturdy defenses reduced to rubble by the relentless onslaught of the Zarathian invaders. Amidst the wreckage, Jack's team stood weary but resolute, their faces streaked with sweat and grime, their uniforms torn and blood-stained. They had fought bravely, against impossible odds, and emerged victorious, but the cost had been high. Too many of their comrades lay fallen, their lives sacrificed in defense of humanity's last stronghold on Viridian Prime. Jack approached Sergeant Ramirez's makeshift grave, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the quiet aftermath of battle. He knelt beside the crude marker, tracing the letters of Ramirez's name carved into the hardened earth with a sense of reverence and sorrow. Ramirez had been more than just a soldier. He had been a friend, a brother in arms, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. And now he was gone, another casualty in the relentless war against the Zarathians. As Jack bowed his head in silent prayer, he felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see Corporal Chen standing beside him, his expression somber but determined. Chen had been Ramirez's closest friend, and the loss weighed heavily on him, but he refused to let grief consume him. Instead, he drew strength from the memory of his fallen comrade, vowing to honor Ramirez's sacrifice with his own unwavering courage and determination. Together, Jack and Chen stood in silent vigil over Ramirez's grave, their thoughts turning to the battles that still lay ahead. The Zarathians may have been driven back for now, but they would return, stronger and more determined than ever. And when they did, Jack and his team would be ready, their resolve unshaken, their spirits unbroken. For they were the defenders of Viridian Prime, the last line of defense against the Zarathian horde, and they would fight to the bitter end, whatever the cost. And as long as they stood together, united in purpose and determination, there would always be hope, even in the darkest of times. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the thick clouds that perpetually shrouded Viridian Prime, Captain Jack Marlowe stood atop a crumbling barricade, surveying the aftermath of the night's battle. His weary eyes traced the scarred landscape, where smoldering wreckage and fallen comrades bore witness to the price of victory. Beside him, Sergeant Ramirez leaned heavily on his rifle, his face etched with exhaustion and pain. Despite his injuries, his resolve remained unbroken, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity in the face of adversity. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of smoke and blood, mingling with the metallic tang of spent ammunition. Yet amid the devastation, there was a sense of triumph, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that had engulfed Viridian Prime for so long. Jack turned to his team, their faces grim but determined, and felt a surge of pride swell within him. They had fought bravely, against impossible odds, and emerged victorious. But the war was far from over, and the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. "We did it," Jack said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Against all odds, we held the line and defended our home. But this victory is just the beginning. The Zarathians will regroup and come at us with everything they have. We must remain vigilant, united, and prepared to face whatever challenges lie ahead." His words resonated with his team, their eyes alight with determination as they nodded in silent agreement. They knew the stakes were high, but they were ready to face whatever trials awaited them, together. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the battered landscape, Jack felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Despite the hardships and sacrifices they had endured, they had proven that humanity's spirit could not be extinguished. With renewed resolve, Captain Jack Marlowe and his team stood tall, ready to face the challenges of the future and defend their planet with unwavering courage and valor. For on Viridian Prime, amidst the ruins of war, the dawn of a new era had begun, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of valor in the face of adversity.